Gen.G gets this first all-important win as we head into Game 2. If we're thinking Team Dignitas would choose first pick now, are we thinking Infernal Shrines perhaps for Gen.G?
I think, yeah, just something a little bit more comfortable. I don't think there's any battleground that I'm afraid to be able to take on Team Dignitas on, so I'd just be sticking to what I know unless I have that kind of counterplay, you know, big strategy involved. But if I just won game number 1 on Dragonshire, I go stick to the plan, save the pocket strategy or, you know, the kind of bamboozle moment for whenever it's necessary, not when you're leading.
And the fact that Dignitas lost on Infernal earlier, maybe that's a sign of hope. I mean, Snitch did say, hey, look, we were winning that game. We kind of threw. They were in control. But if I'm Gen.G, I think that's a very comfortable map to go to if you do have the map choice. And it's up to Dignitas on whether they do want map choice or that first pick. So I am curious on what that will be. I'm ready to get things going. It's just exciting every step.
That it is. So let's do it. Let's find the battleground, and then we can maybe start postulating as to some of these comfort picks. We are going to Tomb of the Spider Queen, where both teams feel comfortable, both teams pick it. In fact, it's interesting. A lot of the map bans that we see in Korea are deviated to ban Tomb versus Gen.G. So knowing that now, Tetcher, what do you feel like are some must picks or some must bans maybe away from Gen.G?
I mean, again, Hanzo jumps up. You've got to be careful just due to the amount of walls on the map. You have a great scatter arrow potential, and otherwise you have to be afraid of that Anubrak. It's another great hard engage map where you can get some really solid angles around in general. And then, of course, you have to be afraid of the solo laners. If you give Kyoltra a little bit too much freedom, he is going to dominate and you're going to get ganked a lot.
And one thing that I'm looking at when going into this draft, not so much that there's a necessary pick or anything of the like, but when it comes to what heroes Wubby is going to be on, I feel like we saw early on him kind of get poked and prodded in that top lane. And though that is the strategy of the Eastern scene, I think a little of that is also taking a note out of the midseason brawl and how this team can kind of, you know, struggle a bit more when Wubby does not have that free open range. And so with that in mind, I want to see something that can make a micro transition down to the bottom lane, kind of poke at the front walls, and then once they get that first Wubby phase, find a way to be able to dive onto that for Gen.G.
Well, back to the norm with the first pick, Tyrande, Yrel priority not as high, but when I look at Dignitas, I really wonder with the bans on Diablo and Garrosh, if maybe a Johanna comes in pre-second ban for Dignitas, and for Gen.G, what route do they go down? Because we've seen a lot of Anubrak. We've seen all the Diablos and Garrosh. It's Tyrael? I mean, it just, that opens up a whole new can of worms of what can counter that.
She is starting to rise up into the even mid bans, though, especially between certain teams and what we have seen even today, Drat.
It very much has. Here is, we get the Deckard Cain and the Hanzo coming out from Gen.G, as you talked about a little bit earlier, Tetcher, the wave clear that controls. Deckard is very heavy when it comes to zone control itself, and Tomb of the Spider Queen has so many constant rotations between mid to top, it's very likely that that is going to be able to net those kills. And as we said, great job for them to have the wave clear, at least post 4.
And as we've mentioned earlier in the tournament, Deckard is one of the few heroes who can have an okay matchup into Tyrande, due to Tyrande's Celestial Attunement mostly focusing on stuns and silences, whereas Deckard Cain, he sets up roots, which is something that is not affected, and as such that level 1 cleanse becomes a little bit less viable.
I think it's where Blaze also rises, because you need that bunker. You get caught in a bad situation late, that bunker's there as a safety option, so I agree with you. I think that's why we're seeing this draft unfold the way it is.
Having bunker also means that you're denying it from your opponents too, and things like Pulse Bomb can't be negated by it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and just I wanted to bring back to some of the trends that we've seen over the tournament for Dignitas. This is far more comfort oriented, right? The opening with the Yrel pick on Dragonshire, I feel like it did get a little bit of punishment, but seeing the high Tyrande there for them, they've been one of the highest priority Tyrande teams throughout this tournament, but then getting Wubby back onto that Blaze, I think that's a really good pickup for them, and kind of at least pushes back a bit more on what I was concerned with there towards Gen.G in that bottom lane.
Going to be seeing the Yrel banned out. That does leave the Malthael open, which Gen.G have shown earlier on, in fact, today against Team Liquid, that they are fine to run. It's a solid map for Malthael. He has great wave clear and has a pretty decent matchup into Blaze as well, and is a fantastic finisher when you already have a setup like Hanzo. But that's not going to be the case. The solo laner, at least, is going to be Leoric.
Well, this also explains the Tracer ban a bit more in detail, because there is no lockdown for Tracer between either of those. And when we look at dive-style heroes, I mean, what else kind of comes to mind for a map like Tomb? Because finding flank positions on the Zeratul that we've seen, it's not as easy. Genji, Tracer are two of the best, so I'm curious how Gen.G or Dignitas will approach this now.
I mean, how do you get on the potential hammer that's going to be backing this is a lot of the focus that I'm having. Is
yes,
how do you kill hammer? You have a Leo who's constantly up in the front line, trading very, very well, has the debuff opportunities, post 13 into 16, Tyrael with the Sanctification, and Hanzo pushing you back there. Yeah, Lunar Flare might be able to connect, but beyond the pre-cleanse, it's suddenly a very big concern, assuming that every time we've gotten that Tyrael, that Gen G has been very comfortable to move into that Sergeant Hammer.
Will they do it? Will they do it? It's Rich's Heroes.
Oh!
No, far more aggro for Rich's liking as he brings back Alarak again. I love that finally we're seeing Alarak be tournament meta.
Now, Hammer is fantastic, obviously, in that it already has a huge amount of protection if they had gone for it. But the issue is that Gul'dan pickup by Dignitas does threaten it a bit. It also can punish the Sanctification. Alarak is a lot more independent. He has a lot more self-sustain. And of course, Counter-Strike can really punish corruption. So you can get some really nice turnaround plays there.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point that you bring up. I would argue they fully intended to move into the Sergeant Hammer until they see the Gul'dan, and then they go, well, we're very comfortable with the Alarak. It's a direct counter to any mage. We've already talked about that. And Gul'dan likes to toe the line with his health bar. And, you know, Alarak very much enjoys any hero that likes to dabble around the 50% HP range. With that short range with the Fel Flame, that's a telekinesis, one shot, one kill.
Well, that does feel pretty late game for Team Dignitas in the Gul'dan. But my question I want to raise, Jay How, is Team Dignitas fell behind early game already on Tomb of the Spider Queen before, and yes, they brought it back. But can you do it versus this Gen G? They've got Leoric, they've got Alarak. These things are going to start stacking up pretty hard.
Well, the wave clear is in their favor. So when you look at the traditional top-mid rotations, and then it's a matter of the bot, the Leo matches the Blaze really well, does well against the Blaze. But so I think it's a matter of who's going to get the rotation up from the bot to the mid lane to get those kills. And when you control the rotations in that mid-top, it does make it easier for decision-making on when you can afford to get those ganks, because you control how fast they can go, and you can position yourself far better in those situations. So if Dignitas doesn't want to get behind, I think it is a matter of they have the better wave clear. It's just a matter of solo lane prioritization.
Well, of course they don't want to get behind, but I want to know, can they get behind? Can they recover if that's the case versus Gen G?
Alarak against Gul'dan. Alarak is licking his chops, so there's a very real threat.
Right, okay, well, we were ready for the game, but right before that, I was going to get predictions, but never mind, we'll just do it. We're going to get into game 2. Dig trying to bring it back.
Dread, Tomb of the Spider Queen, an EU special. We heard about it just our last series with Dignitas here. They did get behind, but this is where we know EU goes to. This is where they played on mid-season brawl against this very same team, but the draft's so different. Very, very different.
And the Alarak confidence from Rich in this tournament has been really surprising and also honestly just impressive. The caliber that he's been able to execute on that hero. We've talked about for a long time. He's been willing to bring it out against maybe opponents that he's a little bit more confident against, and then he would make it look really, really good. But now to find it in the grand finals, find it all the way throughout the bracket, we'll see if they have what it takes here with this composition to take on Team Dignitas. But first off, we got to get introductions. It's the blue squad. Over here, we're going to have Murden, played by JPL. Wubby, going to be representing on the Blaze. Poik on that Gul'dan, very vulnerable through that, along with Snitch on the Rainer. And last up is Zalia on Tyrande. Let's hear it for Team Dignitas.
Their opponents, they currently sit up 1-0 in this best of 5. It will be Sake on the Deckard, Kyocha on Leoric. Rich will be on the Alarak. All eyes will be on him. Reset on the Hanzo. And we'll have Tist on the front line on Tyrael. Give it up for Gen G.
So one thing to keep in mind when we do see the adjustment towards that Alarak for Gen G, that often means that they're going to want those kind of, again, a heavy amount of adjustments through their laning situation, so Alarak can find those very small skirmishes to be threatening. Great scroll of ceiling going to land here on the opening clash between these two teams on the mid wave, and they're not done. A telekinesis combo coming out, but Rich finds himself a nice amount of damage there. A Snitch putting out all that pepper.
Snitch is doing his best to try and match him, but Snitch is actually getting caught out here. That's going to be first blood. You could actually see the thought process because he's giving that penetrating round, trying to keep the Alarak at bay, but the back and forth, there's enough healing to get around for Gen G to get first blood.
And I was just going to compliment that Team Dignitas has a composition that with the Tyrande and the Murden might have the opportunity to get those early kills to counter those rotations out in what we expect here from Gen G. But the fact that level 1 clash not only lasting as long as it did, but more importantly, the fact that Gen G is the one reigning victor and that has got to be a concern here for what seemed like the Western hope of the HGC Finals.
Just keeping an eye on the minimap and watching the way that Blaze is rotating around. It's denying the vision of where he's coming from, but Gul'dan stepping too far forward there. Dread, now that's the name of the game. getting punished early here.
And that is a bigger concern now already on top of what I was highlighting before. Rich didn't even land his damage output. He just used one telekinesis, and that Gul'dan is in a very bad position. And that's what I was trying to highlight when talking about the short Fel Flame range. Yes, we did see a small kind of flank there from Rich, but it's not like he has a big enough distance to be a threat only until he gets that corruption. And Echo Corruption is going to take a long while. Dignitas realize things haven't been looking too good within the 1-4, so maybe having Raynor join the bottom half to get that matchup into Leoric, but Leo Wraith walks away.
I mean, think about how terrifying it is. Not only are you facing an Alarak, but you're facing Rich on Alarak, and you give up 2 early kills where he's like, thanks for the sadism, I'm even scarier every time I get a kill until you try and take me down, which is hard to do against this team of Gen G. So that is very empowering for the early game for Gen G.
Only furthers the snowball into their advantage, but the fact that Gen G with this composition is not playing behind in the levels 1 through 4 in the macro front is a very big tell there. Yeah, that did come through a couple of those kills, but now we do have the explosive arrows available for the Hanzo, and that is going to allow Reset to enable the Alarak transitions to a lot greater there. Poik is a large source, if the only source really for the most part on the wave clear for Team Dignitas. So I'd expect to see Rich try and be able to match him whenever possible and look for a kill.
Kyocho starting to make his rotation up. Blaze in kind there as well, be trying to come up. That will be sniffed out between those two, but the action clearly in these top 2 lanes where Gen G has got the early game, and now that they do have, as you said, that level 4, that lane control that we were talking about in draft, Dignitas, you don't have as much. I mean, you have the clear with Gul'dan, but you didn't get anything from it in the early game.
And I was wondering if because of the struggles that we saw from Team Dignitas, if we would see more focus towards that bottom lane, but the fact that it has only been 1 snitch transition, a Raynor is not that threatening in that circumstance, whereas maybe if a Tron is going to be back in that with Zalia, things would look a little bit different here. So I can't help but feel like Dignitas is kind of scrapping here mentally to try and find a way to deal with some of this pressure, because we're now about 10 gems away from a potential Webweaver phase in the name of Gen G. But that night camp is going to demand a couple of answers and make it more kind of decentivized to pick up a Webweaver phase.
Right now, it seems everybody's calm, trying to make the play, trying to get the rotation. And with Dignitas Dread, you don't want to make the same mistakes. You can see Snitch instantly, he's like, look, I'm not even willing to land into a combo. He just stops his channel, doesn't want to deal with any of that poke. And right now, Dignitas, they do have that camp pushing mid. Gen G's going to respond with their own, and Dignitas, they're not even stepping forward with this Dread.
Yeah, they are moving forward, and Gen G had a perfectly timed night camp sitting behind their own wall, so it's going to make it for a very easy clear. And look at this, with the Webweaver attempt, there's the interrupt there with the Sentinel, not going to allow that. Would have been 49 gems there for Gen G. They would have loved to try and align that middle Wizard camp with that Webweaver phase, as we see the 1v1. Rich now is going to answer back. The Lunar Flare ends up connecting, but no one going to pull the trigger too heavily here. Tyrande and Raynor, not too much kill potential, and Alarak has the opportunity to be able to use that telekinesis both offensively and defensively here. So Gen G missed out maybe on the mid lane pressure, but nothing to kind of be too concerned about.
Well, Gen G, they will get the first Webweavers of the game, spawning at around 5 minutes here. So they'll try and get some control, see if they can push their way forward with this composition behind the Alarak, but the wave clear potential of Dignitas, see how much they give up here in this early going.
For now, the focus up towards top. Rich not able to hit the full combo as he pulls Snitch a little bit closer to the danger zone. Webweaver's now going to descend. Middle is not going to be attended to from either side for now. JPL in the downtime trying to threaten back. Combo coming out. Tyrande's going to be the focus. Zalia able to kite away, dropping a couple of his own heals.
Even shielding the minions here is Gen G, using every bit of their composition with this Tyro to try and empower that push. They keep turning their attention. I mean, if you're a Murden, you're extremely tanky, but the